The envelope that arrived at Clara Bennett's tiny Portland apartment contained no letter, just a single tarnished key, and a faded photograph of a little girl holding a stuffed rabbit in front of Seattle's iconic Fremont Troll. It was the rabbit, its one button eye missing, that made Clara's breath catch in her throat and her knees buckle. She hadn't seen that toy in 27 years, not since the chaotic afternoon at the Pike Place market, when her twin sister, Lily, vanished without a trace. For Clara, life had been partitioned into two distinct halves: the blurry, happy years before she was 5, and the long grey stretch of decades that followed. She remembered the scent of fish and rain, the colourful chaos of the market stalls, the feel of her identical sister's hands slipping from hers as they stopped to look at a performer juggling apples. In a parent's worst nightmare span of seconds, Lily was gone. Despite a massive search, media appeals, and years of private investigators hired by their heartbroken parents, Lily Bennett seemed to have been swallowed by the Seattle fog. Clara grew up in the long shadow of loss. Her parents, though loving, carried a permanent sorrow. Every birthday was a silent tribute to two. Clara became a librarian, finding solace in orderly stacks and stories with defined endings, a stark contrast to her own unresolved narrative. She was 32 now, her life quiet, predictable, and anchored by a faint, unextinguished hope. Then, the envelope came. No postmark, hand-delivered. The key was heavy, old-fashioned, for a door or a padlock. The photograph, however, was a seismic shock. It was her rabbit, Mr. Hops. She'd been holding it that day. But the girl in the picture, while achingly familiar, was not her. The slight gap in the front teeth was on the opposite side. It was Lily. And the Fremont Troll, that massive concrete sculpture clutching a real Volkswagen Beetle, was built years after Lily disappeared. This photo was recent. Driven by a torrent of adrenaline and dread, Clara drove to Seattle. The key felt like a live wire in her pocket. Her first stop was the Fremont Troll. She spent hours there, showing the photo to locals, asking if anyone recognized the woman. She was met with shrugs until a street artist, an older man who'd been painting there for decades, squinted at the picture. "Sure, I've seen her. She comes sometimes, just sits and looks. Quiet. She lives on a houseboat over on Fisherman's Bend, I think. Keeps to herself." Fisherman's Bend was a ragged collection of moored houseboats, not the trendy floating homes of Lake Union. Clara's heart hammered against her ribs as she walked the creaking docks, looking for, she didn't know what. Then she saw it. On the deck of a weathered blue houseboat, its paint peeling under the grey sky, sat a woman. She was staring out at the water, a mug of tea cooling in her hands. She had Clara's face, but harder, lined with a life Clara couldn't imagine. Her hair was shorter, streaked with grey that Clara meticulously coloured in her own. Clara stopped, her voice a whisper stolen by the wind. "Lily?" The woman turned slowly. Her eyes, the same shade of hazel as Clara's, widened. There was no shock, only a deep, immeasurable exhaustion. "You got the key," she said, her voice raspy from disuse. The story that unfolded over pots of tea in the cramped, book-filled cabin of the houseboat was not one of kidnapping by a stranger, but of a tragic, desperate mistake. A well-meaning but troubled aunt, their mother's younger sister whom the family had lost touch with, had been at the market that day. Consumed by a psychotic episode, and a delusion that the girls were in danger, she had taken Lily, fleeing the city. She'd told Lily her family had abandoned her, creating a new, traumatic identity for the little girl. The aunt, whose name was Marlene, had died when Lily was a teenager, leaving her alone, confused and terrified of a world she'd been told rejected her. "I only found out the truth after she died," Lily, who now called herself Ilara, explained, her fingers tracing the rim of her mug. "I found old papers, a hidden journal. I learned my name, I learned about you. But by then, I was broken. I thought, what if you all hated me for leaving? What if I was a ghost? It was better to leave buried." She had stayed in Seattle, drawn to the city of her origin but too afraid to reach out, watching from a distance as Clara graduated college, as their parents passed away one after the other a few years back. She'd attended their funerals, hidden in the back, under a black veil. "The key?" Clara asked, holding it up, tears streaming silently down her face. "It's for a locker at the King Street station," Ilara said. "I put things there. Things I saved for you. My journal. Our birth certificates. A necklace Mum used to wear. I needed you to find me, but only if you wanted to. The key was the test, if you cared enough to look." Clara reached across the table, covering her sister's scarred hand with her own. The silence between them was no longer empty. It was thick with 27 years of missing birthdays, secrets, heartbreak, and a genetic pull that had never ceased. "I always wanted to," Clara said, her voice breaking. "Every single day." The reunion was not a fairy tale instant fix. The twins, once mirror images, were now strangers shaped by different storms. Clara's life was ordered, Ilara's was scarred by instability and trauma. Ilara knew the gritty underbelly of Seattle, Clara knew its library quiet and tourist paths. But the foundational bond, that invisible thread that had tugged at Clara's heart for a lifetime and had drawn Ilara back to the Fremont Troll, was indestructible. Clara didn't return to Portland that week, or the next. She stayed on the rickety houseboat, the two sisters talking through days and nights, filling in the colossal gap with fragments of memory and experience. They discovered eerie parallels. Both favored the same obscure author. Both had a habit of humming the same made-up tune from childhood. They also discovered chasms of difference, Clara's trust in the world versus Ilara's deep-seated fear of it. The story of the Bennett twins became one of slow, painful, beautiful reconstruction. It wasn't about going back to being 5-year-old girls holding hands in a market. It was about two wounded women in their 30s, standing on a weathered houseboat in the Seattle rain, choosing to finally hold hands again, building a new bridge across a lost ocean, one fragile, honest conversation at a time. The lost had been found, not as a relic of the past, but as a companion for an uncertain, but no longer solitary future.